All right, let's talk about one of the biggest challenges in modern construction. You get this massive, incredibly detailed 3D model, and now you have to turn it into clear, reliable numbers for an estimate. So, how do you do that? How do you tame all that digital data? Let's get into it.
Every 3D model is basically a giant database, just packed with information. But if you don't have a system, all that richness can just feel like, well, a bunch of noise. The raw data is overwhelming, and it's so easy to get lost in the weeds. The real question is, how do we cut through all of that noise and find the signal? And this is the real secret. The power to create order, to actually build a logical, defensible estimate, it doesn't come from adding more information. Nope. It comes from understanding and using the data that's already embedded inside every single element of that model. The keys to the kingdom are already in your hand. And we unlock all that data using something called property fields. Now, the best way to think about these is like the DNA of the model. Every single wall, every beam, every window has these little data tags attached to it, telling you its identity, its material, its location, literally everything you need to know to measure it correctly. So the path an estimator follows is actually pretty straightforward. You start with all that raw model data, you figure out which of these key property fields matter, you use them to create your own logical groups, and then you can measure with total confidence. Let's break down the fields that make this whole thing possible. Okay, first things first, let's talk about identity. For any of this to work, we need a common language, right? A way for both the software and you, the estimator, to look at the exact same object and agree on what it is. And check this out, because there's a really important distinction to make. For the machine, there's something called the global ID. Think of it as a permanent digital fingerprint. It's absolutely essential for the software to track changes when the model gets updated. But for us humans, the name field is usually way more helpful. It's just a simple, readable title like concrete wall. That's perfect for a quick sanity check. But here, this is where you, the estimator, really get to take control. The label field is basically a blank canvas. It lets you apply your own custom tags and build groups that make sense for your estimate, things like perimeter walls or phase 1 core. This is you adding your own expertise, your own intelligence, right on top of the model's data. So you can see how all these fields start to work together. You use the class field to get that consistent structure, grouping all walls, all beams, all slabs. Then you use layer to separate disciplines, like pulling the architectural stuff away from the structural. And then you use your label to put your own project-specific logic right on top. It's a really powerful combination. All right, so we've nailed down what an element is. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. What's it physically made of, and what kind of thing is it? This is where your material and your specification fields come into play. And this is such a critical distinction. The material field, well, that's your foundation for cost coding and splitting up your quantities by trade. All the concrete goes to the concrete trade, all the steel to the steel trade. Simple. The type field, on the other hand, groups things by a shared design, like wall type A or door type D2. This is incredibly useful for measuring all the identical items at once, no matter where they happen to be in the project. And we can't forget about the tag ID. This is your bridge back to the 2D world. Those codes like W01 for a wall or D02 for a door, they let you instantly cross-reference your 3D quantities with the construction drawings and schedules. It's absolutely critical for verifying everything and sorting out any questions. Okay, so we know what it is, we know what it's made of, and we know what kind it is. The final piece of the puzzle is location. To structure an estimate properly, you've got to know where everything is. These fields are basically your spatial toolkit, and they help you filter out a ton of noise. Fields like is spatial let you get rid of non-physical stuff you don't need to measure, like room data. Others, like building, are a lifesaver on projects with multiple structures. But for most estimators, day in and day out, the single most important location field is storey. And yep, there's a reason storey is number one. Breaking down a project level by level is just fundamental to how we do our jobs, how we estimate, how we track progress, how we manage billing. This one single property field is hands down the most used filter for creating a takeoff that's structured, logical, and actually useful in the real world. So let's pull all these threads together now. When you start combining these different fields, the ones for identity, for material, and for location, you make that leap from just having a pile of raw data to actually making informed decisions. And this right here is the whole point. You are not a prisoner of how the model was designed. These property fields are the tools that let you impose your logic onto the data. You get to decide how to group things, how to filter them, and how to structure the quantities. You are in complete control. So what's the big payoff? Why does any of this matter? Well, mastering these fields is what finally turns that chaotic tangle of digital noise we talked about into a structured, reliable database. It lets you create disciplined, repeatable takeoffs and pump out crystal clear trade-separated reports. It gives you total control and, more importantly, total confidence in your numbers. So the next time you open up a 3D model, don't just see the shapes and the geometry. I want you to look deeper at the property fields. Ask yourself, what story is all this data trying to tell me? And how can I use it to build a smarter, better estimate? What hidden logic is just waiting in there for you to unlock it?